Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And yeah, I know this is a little bit late. I got sidetracked with reviews thanks to the whole concert tour, music festival thing, but now I'm back on schedule. Got 3 albums on the docket today, and let's start off with one that I've been anticipating for a long time. Man alive, this is one of those records I really want to like more than I do, because I like Amanda Shires. I like a lot of her sound. I like a lot of her presentation. Her in that kind of unstable alt-country vein was having a lot of charm to it. Yeah, I preferred more of her violin work to her vocals, which I never thought were all that expressive, but overall her last 2 albums were really strong, and some of the Jason Isbell influence from her husband was coming through in a really good way. I had a lot of high hopes for her, especially with Dave Cobb on production. And man alive, I can't believe how things just went wrong with this. It's not even that they went wrong, but they went wrong for a reason that I'm not pleased that I have to denigrate here, because she tried to experimentation. She got rid of the majority of the fiddle for more electronic effects, and that's uncharted territory both for her and to some extent Dave Cobb, and it doesn't work. I'm sorry, it really doesn't. The grooves are overweight and unstable. The electronic effects don't really complement anything. The fiddle's almost entirely gone, so that hurts your melodic presentation. And overall, it comes across as a lot more distant than it really should. And that's an issue when we get to the content, because a lot of it is about destruction, going into that deep sunset, which is typically death. And you know what? That can work in the right scenario. We've countered plenty of albums over the past little while that's gone into this territory. But the major problem here is, in order for us to care, there needs to be some sort of stakes. There needs to be some sort of deeper pathos. There needs to be some sort of tension. This comes in 2 factors. For one, the writing is honestly not quite strong enough in order to really get there. There's a lot of misconnections. The poetry is still very good, but not great. It doesn't really tie itself together. It plays for more abstract imagery, and that can work if it has the connecting elements, and it doesn't really here. But a larger problem is Amanda Shires' vocals. Don't get me wrong, I like her voice, but unfortunately, she just comes across as too distant to make these songs feel all that affecting, and that ultimately pushes me away, not helped by the less intimate production, especially when it comes to the electronic elements. Look folks, I hate to give a negative review to this. Even this is not entirely negative, because I think the experimentation should be appreciated, because there's a lot going on here I find interesting. This is definitely uncharted territory for both her and Dave Cobb. I respect that. But at the same time, it's an experiment that didn't really work, and as such for me, strong 6 out of 10. Check it out if you're curious. I know a lot of other critics got on board, but just not for me. At least not here.
Sombra será luz en mi destino. Si no me quieres y al final somos amigos. ¿Y por qué calles andarás si yo te sigo?
You know, this album's been on my schedule the past 6 or so months, and I really wanted to do my due diligence going through her entire back catalog to make sure I fully grasped and understood the context behind her work, popular and otherwise. And it's just a damn shame that a lot of it may have just slipped me by because of a language barrier. I'll be blunt with you guys, I don't speak Spanish, as you clearly have seen in a number of videos. I get a passing bits of it here and there, but I'm not fluent. And I get the feeling that to go into an artist like Natalia LaFourcade, you kind of need to be a little bit more Spanish-speaking fluent, or at least familiar with the culture. And coming into one of the most famous pop stars in Mexico, it just didn't really click for me as much as I wanted to. Now, I respect a lot of her work. She's a great singer, and she's got a wonderful taste for this more organic production, particularly on her Musas series, where she's teamed up with a larger backing band for more textured, organic percussion and very warm, very well-picked acoustic guitars. A lot of the melody lines are really solid. Some of the covers come together really well. Yet I feel with such an intimate presentation, especially in a lot of the production, I feel like in order to get the full impact, I gotta understand the lyrics, and I don't. So this is one of those projects I can respect, certainly, even if it does run a shade long and does feel a tad sleepy at points, at least more than I would personally prefer, but overall, it's definitely good. I get why it's getting the critical acclaim, but again, it's unfortunate that I have to feel like I'm separated from appreciating how good this is by language, but it happens. So if you're curious in her Musas series, I definitely think this is good. Maybe not a shade better than her first one, which I thought was a little bit more lively and upbeat, but I'm gonna give this a very light 7 out of 10, although if you're a Spanish speaker, probably much higher. Definitely make a chance, check this out.
Every hand that has beckoned me to come.
You know, I'm honestly a little bit surprised that I'm only talking about a Mitski album now, because I went back through her entire back catalog, and you guys should have been recommending me to her years ago, because she's exactly the sort of sound that I like in this brand of indie rock. Her vocals typically have a fair bit more maturity, but actually are balanced out with lyrics that cultivate some form of knowing adolescence. I totally get why she was touring with Lorde, by the way. And then when you follow it up with some significantly intelligent and well-structured, incredibly catchy pop song structures that are really clean and glistening, but also balanced out with some nastier edges. Yeah, this stuff, it might call back to certain times of indie rock and going to the mid to late 90s, but really it's a sort of throwback to that tone and sound that really clicked for me. And Be the Cowboy is probably her most refined, or at least most expansive project in this lane to date. That they should now bring in more synthesizers, which are brighter and crisper than ever. The guitars are heavier and meatier. The production gives all this a pretty hefty boost, and yet she never surrenders any of that catchiness that was her biggest hallmark. So you would think this would be an easy sellout for me, that all the critical acclaim would be justly deserved, especially when I can make a comparison to someone like, say, St. Vincent, or maybe her 2014 record that maybe delved into slightly stiffer tones overall. And if you're looking for something that's a little bit looser, more languid, not quite as alien, I can see this project falling in a similar lane, but ultimately satisfying your desire a little better. I know there are people who would want that. I can see you all really liking this. I get why this album's gotten so much critical acclaim. And thus it kind of gets a little awkward when I say I don't quite think this is a great album. And to explain why, it really comes into a few territories. The first being songwriting. The one thing I've always appreciated about Mitski is that she takes an adolescent, or at least a younger frame of mind, but she uses it to approach adult subjects with a level of adult insight. And she's got a level of emotional wisdom I have always appreciated in a lot of her songs. This is definitely true here as well, but it does start to feel like her language doesn't always reflect the level of insight, especially when she's blown up the production in the way she has. And I'll freely admit there are some points where the language starts to feel like it's repeating itself, coming off of Puberty, her last album in 2016. And I get the feeling that if the song structures didn't feel quite as blown up, some people might be considering some of these slightly retreading similar ground, even if I really think she sticks the landing during the final songs, as it just really comes together and capturing some of that disparate, kind of self-destructive loneliness at the very end. But then comes the slightly more egregious problem, and I'm not sure if there's a way that Mitski can get around this, and it's an issue of structure. Now, the one thing that Mitski's always gotten a ton of credit for is taking a punk song structure and pairing it with the elements of pop and indie rock that might be a little bit more expansive, but they're in short nuggets and bite-sized pieces. This is a pretty short album, and it goes by quickly, even feeling a little bit more expansive as it is. But at the same time, it also means that all those little nuggets of ideas that she brings together, well, you find yourself wishing that they were expanded just a little bit more, or given a little bit more room to breathe, especially when she brings in those bigger, more garish synthesizers, or the production tries to blow everything up to 11, and it doesn't quite get there because the songs just feel too short, or they end before they're given a chance to really come into their own. And that definitely becomes a problem when the songs are trying to go for a little bit more bombast, and especially in the midsection kind of fall into a weird gray zone where the juxtaposition is heightened, sure, but it doesn't quite become as effective as you're hoping. I don't know, guys. I definitely like this album. There are definitely a lot of standouts. It starts really strong and ends really strong, but at the end of the day, I can't quite call it great because of the structural issues and the fact that ultimately the lyrics haven't quite picked up at the same pace as the production has. It's on the right path though, so I definitely think she is on the cusp of greatness, and she's already won over far more critics than me. But so for me, I'm thinking an extremely strong 7 out of 10, but again, I'm definitely gonna be keeping my eyes open because this, something special. So yeah, check it out.